This video might be controversial, but I think this will be an interesting thought experiment. I publicly verified Plan B's stock to flow model on May 1st, 2020 on my personal GitHub account. I reconstructed the model in R, a programming language I used in graduate school for data analytics. While I certainly think no model is perfect or an exact match of reality, I am sympathetic to the stock to flow concept where halvings are key inflection points or phase shifts in global Bitcoin adoption. Here's my thought process around why halvings are critical inflection points. First, you must understand that most Bitcoin does not move. In the last month, even given all of the crazy price action that we've seen, 89% of all coins have not moved. And this is relatively low to where it has been for the last 24 months. So most coins do not move, and the price of Bitcoin, just like the price of everything else, is set by the marginal buyer and the marginal seller. If most coins don't move, then which coins are the coins being sold? Miners. Miners play a critical role in the distribution of new Bitcoin. Mining is a hyper-competitive industry where the cost of production trends toward the price of Bitcoin. There are no, or at least very little, long-term profits to be made mining Bitcoin. And miners almost always sell to at least cover their operating expenses, which ultimately trends toward the price of Bitcoin. So in a hyper-competitive market, which is what the mining industry is today in early 2024, $20 billion worth of new Bitcoin is mined and sold per year. Maybe there's some margin in there for the mining companies, but for rough estimates, let's just say $20 billion worth of Bitcoin is mined and $20 billion worth of Bitcoin is sold per year at today's price and today's block subsidy. For the price of Bitcoin to be at equilibrium, this means that there must be 20 billion in buyers annually as well. So you have 20 billion in demand flow, which matches 20 billion in supply flow. People like to say the stock to flow model is not useful because it doesn't model demand, but I don't think that's the right way to think about it. When a halving occurs, the amount of new Bitcoin mined and sold drops to 10 billion. But does that change demand? Why would the $20 billion worth of annual demand flow drop as well? If anything, net new demand for Bitcoin is likely to increase. Halving brings additional attention, more people understand Bitcoin over time, and the dollar continues to get debased. But let's keep it simple and assume demand flow remains the same at 20 billion and supply flow remains the same at 10 billion. This now leaves 10 billion worth of demand trying to buy coins not from miners who are forced to sell to cover their operating expenses, but from the existing holders, which rarely ever move any coins. This is where we get to the idea of a multiplier effect, the research that Bank of America posted a few years ago. The concept is for every $1 of new flow into Bitcoin, the market cap will increase by 118x due to the extreme inelasticity of Bitcoin's supply. For this example, let's round this multiplier effect down to 100x and see what happens with our 10 billion of net buying. Well, 10 billion times 100 would lead to a 1 trillion increase in the market cap of Bitcoin, practically doubling the price of Bitcoin to 140,000. Again, this assumes no change in demand. But I think it gets even more interesting than that. That's the default scenario, holding all things equal. That's demand flow remaining the same and supply flow programmatically and predictably getting cut in half. But reality usually plays out a little differently. This concept is sound at first, but it usually has second order effects. As the halving occurs and price begins drifting up, that begins to attract attention. Bitcoin's not actually dead, and the 99% that thought it was begin questioning why they still own zero Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the apex property, and over time, more people start to realize they need it in their portfolio. And nothing makes that more clear than the price going up. So it's irrational to expect net annual demand flow to remain at 20 billion. More likely it goes to 40 billion, 80 billion, or even 100 billion. Some people even speculate that ETF flows will bring 150 billion in the first year. But let's just say the annual demand flow increases to 110 billion from 20 billion. Again, this demand flow increased because the price began drifting up, and now everyone is realizing Bitcoin is the world's best money and they need a serious allocation. But as demand flow rises relatively quickly, supply flow does not. Supply flow can remain around 10 billion because the miners are only selling to cover their operating expenses. As the price rises, their expenses don't change. Now, as profits get bigger in the mining industry, it will attract more competition and more mining farms will eventually be built out. But it takes time to build out a 100 megawatt mining farm. That doesn't happen overnight. So the 12 months after the halving, mining difficulty can't rise nearly as fast as the price, and supply flow from the miners can actually remain close to 10 billion for 12 months or so. This means 110 billion in demand flow minus the 10 billion in supply flow leaves 100 billion worth of net demand forced to buy Bitcoin from existing holders, an asset with a severely inelastic supply. Keeping the 100x Bank of America multiple, this results in a market cap increase of 10 trillion, putting Bitcoin close to gold parity at around $700,000 per coin, 12 to 18 months after the 2024 halving. So I think this is actually fairly realistic, and it's why I've actually admired the stock to flow model over the years, even if it certainly is not perfect. I think there is real logic around the halvings and miners playing a pretty key role in enabling Bitcoin's historical and likely future parabolic bull runs.